Welcome to the G-Spot. This is the place where we talk about all sorts of interesting topics related to subconscious behavior and motivations. My name is Gila Zak, and I'm a certified hypnotherapist, and relationships are one of my specialties. I help clients overcome blocks and exaggerated behaviors, wounds and traumas that are causing unnecessary conflict in their relationship. Today on the episode, we're going to talk about attraction and sex. Now, if you've been watching this series, you're kind of getting an understanding of what emotional and physical sexuality is. And in the last episode, we talked about those surface traits, the way we can think we see someone to be, but it may not be the full picture of who they truly are. Now, when people come together, each person has a strength that the other person doesn't. The E has qualities and abilities and gifts that the P doesn't, and the P has qualities and gifts and strengths that the E doesn't. And so we see this as complementary. This is why when we attract our equal and opposite partner, we're likely to have that more ideal level of harmony in the relationship. And it's this complementary nature that is the spark. It's the chemistry, it's the zhuzh, it's the part that keeps the relationship going far beyond the honeymoon phase. Now those equal and opposite personality traits that can create that spark, that initial attraction in the beginning, can oftentimes become the points of contention later on in the relationship, especially if it's going through conflict. And oftentimes these reactions are very unconscious. So you might think of it this way. In the beginning, the emo saw that physical as being really emotionally expressive and verbally always telling you how they feel and taking control of a dinner menu and where we're going and where we're vacationing and how the house should be set up. But over time, that emo is going to start to see that P is a little controlling, a little dominant, a little too smothering. And the opposite would be true with a physical who first finds that emotional, who's kind of quiet and, a little bit more controlled and contained, is seeming very confident. They've got their shit together. They don't need to be out there proving to the world that they are the center of the universe. But over time, that physical sees that emotional as cold, shut off, and unavailable. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that, shall we? Because I think it'll give you a more clear understanding of what the attraction normally is and how this plays out in sex. Now, what does that physical look for in an emo? And again, this is not always conscious, but they're looking for that calmer nature, somebody who doesn't need to be so emotional all the time, doesn't feel as frenetic or anxious or unsettled. At least they don't appear to be on the outside. Again, it's that more subdued nature about them that the physical perceives as confidence. Now, because the emotional feels their emotions very strongly, but often doesn't know how to express them or doesn't feel comfortable expressing them, that physical can see that as a strength. They see them as emotionally very strong, and they find that very attractive. Their logical nature, those emos, they're all about logic and practicality, can be very attractive to the physical because it seems, again, like they've got that shit figured out. They're not struggling. They're not anxious or nervous about how things are going to go and what the outcome is going to be. But over time, it becomes a problem because the physical's like, hey, you're not giving enough attention to the shit that really needs attention, and it's usually me. Now, what the emotional was originally attracted to in the physical is the ease at which they can express themselves emotionally, the way that they can feel at ease in their body and come forward in social situations and just seem to be so confident in who they are. They can express their physicality more naturally and comfortably, and they love the spontaneity of life. They don't seem to get stuck in the ruts that the emos can sometimes do. That emo that is likely to perseverate and ruminate, they find it really attractive that physical just knows what they want. They can go into the restaurant, look at the menu and say, yeah, I'll have that please, while that poor emo over there is still looking up and down saying, what are you having? So essentially, one of the reasons why the chemistry is more long-lasting when we are with our equal and opposite is because unconsciously this person is very different from us, and it can create a more dynamic and rich relationship. Unconsciously, we admire how different this person is from us, and it can kind of create that full attraction, that pull that brings us into that other person. And we see this all the time, right? These opposite types of personality. We see them in pop culture. You might think of, some of the coming of age movies, right? You've got the jock, and then you have the real bookish girl. Or, you have the cheerleader, and then you have the nerdy science guy. So I'm about to give you the most, deepest insight into how this whole EMP works on a sexual level. And that is that one of the biggest mistakes we can make in a relationship is to assume that our partner's needs and motivations are the same as ours. This is the one thing that will create the most conflict in a relationship, especially in the bedroom. If we can understand our partner's unconscious motivations and needs instead of judging them, then we don't have to create all this conflict in the relationship. Very often when two people end up in counseling together, it's because they're saying, you don't hear me. Oh, really? Well, you don't talk to me. Oh, well, you don't touch me. Oh, well, you don't give me enough space to be me. And so when we automatically assume that the other person needs more touch, that'll make the relationship better. Let's just spend more time together. Or the one person assumes, what will really make this relationship better is if we spent more time apart, if we had more individual interests. But if we're triggering the wound within the other person, not understanding what they really need, this is where the relationship has a really high rate of falling apart. A really essential piece to consider is that through this theory, by taking these times to watch these videos and learn about yourself and your partner, you will know how not to trigger the behavior in your partner that either you don't like or is causing conflict in the relationship. It's magical. It's a superpower. It's going to be able to give you that one unique tool that you can use to create more harmony in the relationship that you're in. And consequently, once we know what their unconscious motivations and desires are, we can behave in a way that brings out behavior in them that we do like, that what brought us to them in the first place. Now, emotional and physical sexuals have very different priorities for sex, and often they fail to communicate this. This is one of the biggies, right? And when we look back and see what is the physical's primary intention, albeit unconscious, for having sex, it is to feel accepted, to feel loved, to get their physical need for closeness met. Now, not all physicals are able to express themselves emotionally, and so they will use that sex as a way to physically communicate with their partner. And so for them, sex takes on a much bigger meaning, more often than not, because it, number one, proves that they are loved, that they are worthy, that they are accepted, that they are important, and that the relationship is stable. The emotional has very different motivations for sex. They need sex and they want sex just as much as the physical, but they don't predicate the experience of sex as an indication of where the relationship is at. They enjoy the connection, they enjoy the intimacy, they enjoy the experience of it all. But it doesn't hold all of the value that the physical gives it. The emotional is there to come in, have the communion, and then get on with whatever the other experiences are in their life that bring them satisfaction and a sense of, well, belonging. The physical will often use the experience of sex as a way to prove to them that they belong, and the emotional will use the experience of sex as a way to connect and then find their belonging elsewhere. I always want you to bear in mind that we're talking about the extreme ends of emotional and physical sexual personality here, and it's no different when we're talking about sex. Physical sexuals will generally want the sex act to be prolonged. They'll want it to take hours. Yes, hours at times. They want to prolong that sexual experience. They want to have more time with it. They want to dig into the juiciness. They want to experience the eye contact. They want to go into the whole in the being of the experience, the communion of two souls. And fundamentally, the physicals have a very hard time separating their emotions from sex. The emotional sexuals are looking for the experience of sex to reconnect with their partner, to find that place to come back into the connection, to have the sexual release that comes with sex, but they don't place the importance on it that the physical does when it comes to an emotional level. They can have sex without being particularly emotionally connected to their partner in the moment. And consequently, we see that if people are single and they're out in the world and they are, just hooking up or doing whatever they want to do with their sexually free selves, as they should be, then we see the physicals generally need to be or have an emotional connection to a partner before they have sex. Whereas the emotionals in general can have more of those hookups, those kind of one-night stands, those kind of like, let's get together and have some yumminess and then we both go on our way. There's not the emotional connection there per se. It's just the sexual experience that they're looking for. Now, if we have a person who's physical and they are single and they are somebody who's feeling especially insecure or maybe wounded, and they need that sexual interaction to kind of reinforce a sense of self-worth, self-acceptance, and self-value, then they may be able to go out there and have a lot of sexual partners as a way to subconsciously reinforce that they're attractive, that they're wanted, and that they are of value. Now, as I mentioned, the physical sexual, their goal is to prolong sex, to make it as long and juicy and delicious as they can. And this is a form of dominance. Again, when we we think of the physicals being a bit more dominant personality. They oftentimes will prefer dominant sexual positions as well. The emotional will very often prefer the more submissive positions, and they can be a little bit irritated if sex takes too long. If it goes too long, even after they've had their orgasm, if the physical wants to persist in touching and stroking, or maybe let's do that again, it can put a lot of pressure on that emotional sexual, and it actually causes them to withdraw from the experience emotionally, if not physically. Now, there's something you need to know about that. We all have rich fantasy lives. We should anyway. And the thing to consider is that, let's just say you have this emotional sexual who is in a very high position of responsibility and authority, keeping their calm under pressure. They're keeping all the shit together in whatever way that they do in their professional life. They might come into the bedroom and they like being with that physical sexual or that partner who takes control and becomes the dominant, because it gives them an opportunity to be submissive in a way that they don't have to do in their everyday life. They don't have to be dominant in the bedroom. They can allow someone else to take control. And this is another way that that emotional and physical relationship can play out in a very harmonious way in the bedroom. Now, sexual conflict can show up in many ways in a relationship, but oftentimes, if that physical is pressing the partner for sex, the emo is going to feel that pressure, and they're going to do one of two things. They're going to disengage and disconnect, and that causes that physical to feel more rejected, and they're going to come forward and pursue to a point to where that emotional then is going to either blow up or say something hurtful, and then that poor physical just goes away feeling more dejected. Or the physical is going to come forward and pursue for sex because they generally need it more frequently. And then that emotional is going to feel the pressure of it and acquiesce and have sex, not necessarily because they want to, but because they want to avoid the conflict within the relationship that it would cause if they said no. I want to be clear, this is not about overstepping boundaries when it comes to sexual consent between partners. This is just a dynamic that says, you know, I know what you need, clearly you need this, I'm going to give this to you so that you don't have to keep pressuring me. Doesn't mean they may not like it or enjoy it. They very likely will once they get into it. The E is more likely to say, fine, let's just do this because I know it'll make my partner happy, but it's not necessarily what they were looking for in the moment. Now, in another episode, I'll be getting into the different types of sex and why we have sex and the different roles that sex can play in our relationships. But this was a nice little taste, wasn't it? To kind of get the idea of what we're looking for in that emotional or physical on a sexual level, and what may be triggering us to have certain behaviors that are either working for us or against us in the relationship. In the next episode, I'll also be touching upon very unconventional or non-traditional relationship dynamics such as polyamory or consensual non-monogamy, and the way that these kind of dynamics play a role in E&P as well. What we're looking for, what we're looking to get met by being in these relationships. So to give this a brief overview, remember, don't assume that what you need and what you want is what your partner needs and wants on an unconscious level when it comes to sex. So overall, we can see that the physical can learn that perhaps the emotional needs their space from time to time, and the emotional needs to learn that they need to come forward and check in on that sensitive physical here and there. Once again, I'll be putting the link to the emotional and physical sexual assessment for the way you're behaving in your current relationship or your most previous one down below in the comments. If you have comments or questions, please leave them below. If you like this content, please show your love on that little like button and subscribe. Share it with your friends. Let them know that there's some support for them in a way to bring more harmony to their relationship. I appreciate your time with me as always, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the G-Spot.